Great. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Okay. Awesome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this week's meeting of the Firewheel Guest Lecture Series. I am really excited to present our speaker today, Jacob Hansen. He's a very good friend of mine. Hey, Jacob. Jacob's going to be speaking to us about public speaking, social change, how to help other people through just positive encouragement, entrepreneurship, and probably a few other things. So, but before they turn the time over to you, I just want to give a little background of Jacob. So, Jacob grew up here in Utah as well, currently going to BYU. Sounds like he's made a shift in his career lately, going for law school. Early in his life, though, he started up this organization called Lionheart, where he helps teens and young adults and just people in general to just like with like public speaking, and they just do events, just like help encourage people. Another fun fact: Jacob got married this past year, and he had some of the best groomsmen in the world. One in particular,
including Micah. Yep.
Yeah, I was actually got to be one of those. So yeah, Jacob and I go way back. So yeah, without further ado, Jacob, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely, I would love to. Thank you, Micah, and thank you, everyone, and hello to everyone watching this. I wish I could see you. Unfortunately, I can't, so you'll just have to stick with seeing me. Sorry about that. But let me introduce myself. Before I introduce myself, though, I want to ask you a question. Like Micah said, I'm here to talk to you about a bunch of different things. We got some public speaking in there, some motivational book writing, some social movements that have changed people's lives. But I want to ask you a question. Do you want to change the world? More specifically, have you ever wanted to change the world, but felt like you didn't know how to start? Or perhaps you wanted to change the world, but you didn't know how exactly you wanted to change the world. You just knew that you wanted to. Well, if you've ever thought that to yourself, then you're in the same boat that I was many years ago. So although I may look super young, I know people tell me I'm like 16, 14 years old still. I'm actually a little bit older, just a little bit. I'm 22 years old right now. And I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened to me started about 6 years ago. Now, this story I'm going to tell you has led to some cool things happening in my life, which I'll tell you about later. But for now, let me show you a couple of pictures. So, just one sec.
Yeah,
all right.
Fingers crossed it'll work this time. Oh, sweet. You're the wizard.
Okay, working. So what you're looking at now is a picture of me and two of my best friends when I was 16 years old. Yeah, people tease me about the hair, but I say it was
modeling, dude.
I don't know, I really missed out my true calling there, but I settled on the second best thing, which was this group of people. Now, you may wonder, why are we standing in front of a red curtain making weird poses? Well, this was actually our first attempt at creating a flyer and a website that would advertise our public speaking services. That's right. I'm right there on the right in the gray shirt. In the middle, you have my friend Dallin, and then on the side, the girl is Kiana. And we decided that we were sick and tired of all the young people, all the teenagers, all of our friends who were just absolutely lame, who were doing nothing with their lives, and who complained about just the dumbest things. So we got together and we said, we want to change the world. We're not sure exactly how, but why don't we start by inspiring our friends? So we came up with something we called Lionheart. And Lionheart was a lot like Firewheel. The idea was that young people can do amazing things, you can find your dream, and you can make a big difference in the world, even if you're young. So we really didn't know that doing this was hard or anything like that, so we just decided to give it a shot. And that is, by the way, one of the most important lessons you can learn. If you don't know how hard something's going to be and you just try, or you don't believe that it's going to be hard, then chances are you're actually going to be a lot more successful than you might think. All right, this next picture is one of the most amazing experiences of my life. This was our first big event. We had done a couple of events, but we decided to just go all out, and we decided to rent out a high school auditorium. And I don't know how high schools exactly look wherever you guys are from, But at least here, there are these big rooms that every school has, and they can fit about up to 1,000 people. And this particular auditorium could fit that many. And so I paid out of my own money that I had saved up. I paid $1,000 so that we could have this event center for one night. And we spread the word as much as we could, and we told everyone we knew, and we said, we're doing this big thing, come and be part of it. And to our surprise, we literally had hundreds of people show up. And it was miraculous. We were able to get on stage, and we shared these inspiring messages, we gave motivational speeches. But perhaps the coolest part was this girl right here. Her name is Grace, and you'll notice I'm kind of giving her like a side hug right there. That's because Grace was struggling a lot that night, and she actually intended to commit suicide that same evening. But she came to our event, and she heard our messages, and she came up to me afterward, and she said, I'm not going to commit suicide. You gave me a reason to live again, and she became one of our best friends. She's actually still one of my best friends, and married another one of my best friends, but that's a story for another day. So, this is kind of the introduction to Lionheart, and ever since then, let me just show you a couple more pictures. We did some really cool things, and Lionheart ran for about 2 years after that. This is Grace, the one you saw in the last picture, and this is Megan, who I ended up marrying. But the reason why there's a picture of them right here is they were two of our first students, because we said we are going to be motivational speakers, but we also want to train other youth to do the same thing. So as we went and we did events, we would collect these other teenagers who also wanted to be motivational speakers. And perhaps that relates to a lot of you guys. You want to make a difference and you want to help other people also make a difference. So that's exactly what we did. This is a picture of Dallin at one of our events, because we not only went to speak at schools and conferences and things like that, we also hosted our own events. And that's another really important lesson that I want you to learn. We didn't have all the opportunities that we wanted. In fact, there were some times when we felt like we didn't have any opportunities, so we had to make our own. Few people are going to want to just hire or even let speak for free a bunch of teenagers. Why? Because they think, oh no, I don't want to jeopardize my event by having some poor speaker come get on stage, some random teenager who has no life experience, who doesn't know anything. They don't want to risk their event on you unless they know that you're a good speaker. And so we were kind of fighting an uphill battle, like I suppose many of you guys are. And so what did we do? We took matters into our own hands, and we created our own events. We said, fine, if you're not going to have us come speak to your school, then that we're not going to let that stop us. And instead, we're going to rent out, in this picture you see a hotel room. We used a lot of conference hotel rooms, and we would host events for 50 people, 60 people, as many as we could get there. We built this backdrop. You have a bunch of like testimonials there. We would get all the chairs. We would build a sound system, and we would just create our own events. And those ended up being very successful, and we had people coming back over and over. And the biggest lesson there is that you can create your own opportunities. Sometimes it's expensive, sometimes it takes time and creativity, but you can do it. This is one of our last events, or at least I say one of our last big events, because when all of us were about 18 to 19 years old, we all left to serve missions for our church. And so what that meant is we had to leave Lionheart and take a 2-year hiatus away from it. I went to Russia, and so for 2 years I didn't do any public speaking. When I came back, I started doing it again. But this picture is one of our last events. I'm teaching about how to find your big dream. And this is one of our biggest turnout events. We had almost, at least in that phase, it was an all-day event. We had like 100 people there. It was super cool. And really, for me, Lionheart was a dream come true. So let me just jump through a quick couple of pictures here. These are some of our Lionheart warriors, we called them. In other words, youth who wanted to get on board with the vision, wanted to be part of it, and they wanted to do the same thing. And if not actually be public speakers, they at least wanted to live the principles we were teaching. This is at one of our events. We had lots of people sharing and discussing, motivating each other. It was really important for us to build a community so that people could feel like they were part of something, because that's really what changes people sometimes. Here are some more of our mentors. This is Ethan. He actually married Grace, who you saw in the... So just FYI, if you start a public speaking movement, you may end up marrying someone from it. It's just a fair warning.
This sounds like the ultimate matchmaking opportunity.
I know, Micah, this one's for you. Anyway, so yeah, these are some of my best friends, and they became mentors and public speakers alongside me. Here are some others. And then this is the last group that we've done just this last year in 2020. So this is a program we have. Anyway, I'll stop presenting so you can watch me a little more. Cool. So that's really the story of Lionheart and where it's gotten us so far. Lionheart has been a dream for me and for a lot of the other people involved, and it's taught us so many lessons. But one of the biggest lessons that I want you to learn is that just because you're young, or just because you're inexperienced, or just because you lack resources doesn't mean you can't make a difference. There's a lot to be said for just going out there and trying, because if you try, you might surprise yourself. So that, my friends, is the short story of Lionheart. And you can learn more at thelionheartmovement.com. You can learn a little bit more about our story, read some articles and things like that. But I wanted to open it up to the rest of you and see if you have any questions. Now, let me give you just one last piece of information before I do that, because I want to hear about all your questions, but I also want to let you know about where I am right now. So I did Lionheart pretty much exclusively when I was a teenager, and then I went on that mission, and I went to Russia for 2 years, and I came back. I'm still doing public speaking, and I'm also doing some other cool things. One of them is that I have my own business right now, and my business is to help authors create best-selling books. When I was part of Lionheart, I ended up writing 3 books, and I published them, and that led to me helping other people, like other speakers, other business people, write and publish their own books. So currently, that's my business, and I have experience by doing that as an entrepreneur and also as a freelancer, which may be something that you guys are interested in doing, because it's a great way to start a sole proprietor business where you're working for yourself and where you're your own boss. And so we can talk about that. I'm sure Micah has some questions.
This is actually one of his books right here.
There you go.
I actually just almost finished this book the other night. So yeah, this is the real deal. He's on a book, and that's you right there, right?
That is me.
Okay, so this is the real deal. Anyways, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like Micah just showed you, I've got a couple books. I actually have. Here's my first book. It's called You Have a Dream: How to Figure Out What the Heck to Do with Your Life. It may be a little blurry. Anyway, my second book is right here, The Lionheart Letters. Oh well, you can't see it. I've blurred my background too much. Anyway, this book is all about how to become a mentor and how to champion other young people, or just teenagers generally, so that they can be their best and do the best things that they can. Since then, I've been able to help a lot of other authors publish things, which has given me a unique insight on how to be successful, because I get to work with all of these successful people and help them write their own books. So, anyway, that's a little bit about me. Micah, do you have any questions, or do you want me to keep rambling?
No, I don't have any questions yet. So, guys, I would just say, if you could start turning those in, just any questions you have about Jacob, about how to get started, as a public speaker, or as an author, or just even as a mentor, I think that'd be great. But one question I do have, though, is what would you recommend the process for people to get started with public speaking from ground zero?
So with public speaking, it's really one of those industries where it's almost like a chicken and an egg problem. You kind of have to have credibility in order to get gigs, which you need in order to have credibility. So with public speaking, the best thing, and this is a principle for any business, I think, the best thing to do when you're setting up a public speaking business or movement or whatever you want to call it, is you have to ask yourself, who is going to listen to you and why do they want to listen to you? Same thing if you're starting a business selling pencils. You got to ask yourself, this is a pen, but anyway, let's say you're selling pens, right? You got to ask yourself, who's going to buy this pen and why do they want this pen? There are lots of other pens out there, just like there are lots of other motivational speakers out there. And so you got to ask yourself what makes you different, and why would someone trust that your pen or your speech is going to be that awesome and worth paying for, or worth just giving you the time? Because something that a lot of, a hard reality of public speaking is that even if you do a gig for free, the person who is hosting the event is putting a lot of faith in you. And it's very expensive to them if you do a bad job. Because in the world of public speaking, attention is like gold. it's the same way as marketing, but people are showing up to the event, and they're paying a lot of times to show up to the event. If they're not paying in money, they're at least paying with their time. And if you give them a poor experience, that's going to reflect badly on the entire event. So that's why a lot of organizations that hire public speakers are really hesitant, and they only want to put their money, whether that's literal money that they're paying or just the money they're generating from the event, they only want to give that to a speaker who is top-notch. So with that in mind, you got to do everything you can to build credibility. And there are a couple of ways to do that. Number one is, if you can speak for free, always speak for free. This is also a principle in freelance work, though you may apply it a little bit less. When you're starting up a business, you need testimonials and you need reviews from clients. If you have to work for free to get those, I think it's totally worth it, especially in public speaking. Because when you're doing public speaking, you have to get, first off, testimonials and reviews, and then you also want to get footage of you speaking. You want audio recordings, you want video recordings, you want pictures, and all of that is going to enhance your credibility. So first off, just speak anywhere you can. And every time you speak, ask the organizer or whoever let you speak for a review, have them just write a couple thoughts about how you did, and then take as many pictures as you can. I mean, try not to take them yourself. That's kind of tacky. Have someone else take them for you. And that way you can just start to move from, speaking in your parents' basement to, like some friends, to get some pictures of that. That's somewhere. You can start somewhere. Move up to speaking at, a library or like on the street or something like that to a small crowd. Move up from there to speaking at schools for free. Maybe like an elementary school, right? Where no matter what you say, they're going to love it, right? And then you move up to like a high school, and you're able to take those, basically those stepping stones one by one, and slowly move yourself into a place where people respect you, they know you, they can go to your website or whatever, they can watch videos of you on YouTube, and they know that you're a pro. Another thing you can do, and this is something you can always be working on, is improve your story. Because people pay for your ability to entertain them, and a big part of that is your story. I know a lot of you guys have been through a lot, and that means you have gold as far as speaking goes and as far as telling people your story. So, some things you can start doing today are journaling, and that'll help you eventually write a book, or if not a book, then at least kind of get your main stories together, and also just tell your stories as much as you can. So, start writing them down, telling yourself, and then start telling other people. And from that, you'll start to craft a presentation that'll be really, really impactful. And you'll highlight the best moments in your life and the worst moments and the greatest lessons learned and the biggest takeaways. And then eventually from that, you'll have all the content you need. And as you start speaking, you'll start getting more and more content. You'll be more confident in your message. And then eventually you can move to things like writing a book, making that a bestseller, and, speaking on the big stages. So that's kind of my idea about a short, simple process that you can use to become a public speaker or at least get started.
Sweet. Okay, that's great. That's great. I love that. So we just had a question come in from Teddy, and just a little bit background of Teddy. Teddy is he's an all-star. He actually has a pretty cool story of himself. Teddy, we need to talk more about this, but I'd love to hear this. I think he just wants to become a worldwide entrepreneur, but I imagine public speaker is probably part of that. Yeah, Teddy's worked really hard to get his college degree. He paid for it just through starting up his own graphic design store, and he's been a really amazing champ through the whole Fire Wheel program so far. So what Teddy said is that people tend to be very shy and scared when called upon to talk in public. How do you get rid of that fear? So that's probably something that you don't have, I don't have, right? Not a lot of people have. I think everyone has that, honestly. So that's a great question, Teddy. So yeah, Jacob, what would you say to that?
Well, Teddy, thank you for your question. Based on what Mike has said, I can tell you're definitely an all-star. So you'll take, whatever lessons you can out of this presentation, and I know you'll apply them. So good on you for doing that. To be honest, I still get nervous when I'm presenting. Not as much as in the beginning, but in some ways even more than the beginning. Because, I don't know, it really just depends on different experience. Like if you're speaking to an event that's bigger than any event you've ever done, you might feel more nervous, even if you're used to doing, online videos or webinars or anything like that. So I think it's okay to feel nervous, and don't let that stop you. Personally, for me, a trick that I use is just for myself, I know that once I get into speaking, like once I start my presentation, everything is good. And I really get in the groove and I really enjoy it and I don't feel nervous anymore. I just like feel like I'm on my home turf. But the first couple of minutes are the most important. So whenever you're giving a presentation, I would absolutely have an outline, absolutely have practice everything you're going to say. But before you get on stage, always practice your presentation. Whenever you're doing an event, especially if it's an important event, never go on stage with content that you've never presented before. The reason being is that once you say it out loud, sometimes it sounds different than what you expected in your head. And so sometimes you just need to present in order to know what you're supposed to talk about in the first place. Just don't make that first draft presentation be on the stage. Other tips for public speaking, focus on the very beginning of your presentation. So practice the whole thing, but then memorize the initial couple like paragraphs, if you will, of your presentation. I like to start out a lot of presentations with a question or a series of questions. Memorize them, or at least practice them so that you can just spout them off. Because what that's going to do is it's going to just ease you into the audience. And the first couple of seconds when you're giving your first impression are some of the most important. So always practice your presentation. No matter how good you are, always run through it. And then focus especially on the first couple of minutes. But then aside from that, you really just have to do it and you'll get better. And I think some people maybe are just, actually I don't think that some people are incapable of doing public speaking just because they're too terrified of it. I don't think that's the case. But some people are definitely better at it than others, and some people find talking a lot more natural than others. So if you're one of those people who struggles a little more, that's fine. Just start practicing, and like anything, you'll get better at it.
Yeah. So would you say it gets easier over time to just speak in public? Because I know for me, like, it's something that still scares me from time to time, but does it get easier?
There are skills that you learn when you do enough speaking. And so as part of Lionheart, I not only did a lot of speaking, but I also trained speakers. And that means I went to a lot of conferences and I learned how to be a good speaker. And there are a lot of tips and tricks when you're presenting on a stage that you just learn. And you're either someone tells them to you or you just figure them out. And once you've figured out those basic rules of speaking on the stage, it's a lot easier to be interesting. And also, once you've presented enough about your story, you can kind of just like make up stuff. And I don't mean that as in like just make up whatever out of your hat, but you've told your story so much and you've learned how to pull principles from your story and from the things that you do so well that you don't have to think about that if you forget your next line, so to speak. If you are asked on the fly to give a presentation, you already have things that you can pull from. And then on top of that, if you're a good public speaker, meaning if you've practiced and you've learned kind of the rules of public speaking, then you don't have to be worrying about things like, am I standing up straight? Am I speaking slowly or clearly enough? Is my body language distracting? Am I dressed appropriately? Like random things like that. You just automatically do them. And so in that way, it actually becomes easier. Does it become less scary? I think it becomes less scary in the long run, but there will always be those moments probably, at least for me, where, I'm still nervous. And that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. Thank you for that. And I would, if I could just add something to that as well. Something I realized over time, just from speaking in public, I haven't done quite as much as Jacob has done by any means, but what I found is that also just right beforehand, just trying to like prepare myself, just almost just trying to like better understand the audience. If I just think of them like, oh, like they're friends and family, or like I love them, like I care about them. It's just a lot easier to think of like, oh, these are like all strangers, because that does help. But yeah, it's scary, and I don't know if there's really a cure for that. So if you come up with something, Jacob, please let me know. Please let all of us know. Great. So
Sounds good.
Okay, so Teddy just asked a really great question. I was going to ask this too. So he said, sorry if I may ask, you've talked about the rules of public speaking. Could you share those with us? So I know there's probably tons, but do you know if there's like maybe like the top 5, or just, I guess if you want to share all 100 or how many, just please go ahead.
All right, well, to be completely honest, I don't have a list, except maybe I do. I'm going to look at my book real fast. Let me just skim through and see if I wrote a chapter about that. To be honest, sometimes I have to like refresh myself about things that I write, just because I forget. Okay, let's see here. Do I have a list of the rules of speaking on stage? No, I don't. So let me just give you a couple off the top of my head. Number one is you have to be authentic. And this is probably the number one rule, because if you're not authentic, no one's going to listen to you. Being authentic means that you're yourself. You're comfortable enough in the situation that you can tell the truth, and you can tell it in a way that matches you. It's really easy to see other speakers and try to mimic them. And I've done this a lot, and in some ways it can be helpful because you can learn different ways of presenting and speaking just by copying other people. But ultimately, you want to be you. And as soon as the audience feels like they're being sold something, or you're presenting in a way that doesn't really match you, you're going to lose effectiveness. So how do you actually be authentic? That's a great question. I think a big part of it boils down to knowing what your message is and knowing why you are the person to present it. And you don't have to be just like all the other motivational speakers out there. Like, you don't have to be like I don't know, any of the big motivational speakers you'll find on YouTube. They're great, they're successful, but they're not you. And so don't try to mimic them, learn from them, but do your best just to focus on your message, because you have something to tell the world that no one else does. So be sure that you key in on that and be careful about how you present it. So some other rules you might say about public speaking. I'm going to skip the ones that pertain to being on a stage, because there are some things like when you're presenting on a physical stage that you want to be aware of. When you're presenting, some big no-nos. Don't speak too fast. It's really simple. Probably didn't need to tell you that, but a lot of people speak way too fast when they get nervous. I sometimes tend to slow down when I'm nervous, but sometimes I speed up, so I have to be careful of that. But just take it as like a general rule that however you speak normally, you're going to speak faster when you're on stage. So try to practice speaking a lot slower. Along with that, try to eliminate filler words. I'm conscious of this, and I'm a little out of practice, so you'll notice that I've said and I've said like a lot. Try to say those as little as possible, because it's so much better just to pause. Gives people time to think, and I feel like it just makes you sound smarter. Let me think of some others. Okay, one other that I'll share with you is a secret in how you structure your presentation. Specifically, let me talk about the very start of your presentation. When you're giving a keynote presentation, so not necessarily every presentation needs to have this element, but when you're speaking, for an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, and it's a really important presentation, you're going to tell your whole story, you're going to give the strategies that are going to help the people, whatever. When you're doing a big presentation like that, start out by enrolling people. And what that means is when someone starts listening to you, they're going to be asking themselves, subconsciously or consciously, why should I care? Why am I listening to this person, and what am I going to get out of it? So because of that, you have to answer those questions. Now, no one's going to come up to you in the middle of your presentation, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, what am I getting out of this presentation? Because that's rude, and no one would actually do that. But they're thinking it. So you need to answer the question as soon as possible. So a great way to do that is to start your presentation after some, introduction or some other things like that. Your bio is read, you get on stage, you accept the round of applause or whatever. And then start by asking the people why they're there. If it's an informal situation, you can literally pass the microphone around and you can ask people what they're hoping to get out of this event, if it's like a conference or something like that. And then you can adapt your remarks to actually fill that specific need. But if it's a more formal event where you can't really just ask people like that, it might feel weird, then what you can do is enroll them in the idea of listening to you by asking some rhetorical questions. Or you can have people raise their hands even. You can ask questions like, how many of you here have ever, and list some problem in the world. Like, how many of you here have ever struggled to make ends meet or felt the stress of finances? And then a lot of people are going to be like, because everyone's pretty much faced that. And then you could ask another question, assuming your presentation was about, I don't know, real estate investing or about how to start a business. Let's say it was about how to start a business. Then you could say, how many of you would love, so on the first hand you talked about how many of you have faced this problem, then you say, how many of you would love to be financially free and feel like you can make ends meet comfortably while you own your own business? And then everyone like raises their hand and they're like, okay, there's the problem, I felt that. Solution, yeah, I'd love to have that. And then you could say, I'm an expert in helping people start their businesses, and I've spent the last 10 years or whatever building up this many successful businesses, and today I have the 5 most important principles for building a successful business. How many of you would love to hear what those are? And then everyone's like, oh yeah, sign me up. Okay? So that's just a small tactic you can use to enroll people so they know why they're listening to you. Asking those questions, yeah. I know that isn't a comprehensive list, but it's at least a start.
Yeah, no, I imagine there's, that's probably why you wrote the book, right? There's probably a lot of stuff, so thank you for that answer, though. That's great. So a question that just came to mind for me is, especially with COVID and just not being able to do like speaking in gatherings, or just because there's probably a lot of people, even like me, who like don't have like a solid public speaking traction, so like it's not like we can just go like to an event, but maybe there's some people out there who just want to be able to influence people, or just like even on social media. So what would you like recommend to them? What are like some of the best practices you've seen to be able to positively influence people?
After you figure out what your message is and how you want to positively influence them, I think the biggest thing is just to start, because you really don't have to be perfect. And I think all the things I've done in my life have pretty much showed me that I don't have to be perfect to make a difference. Before I did Lionheart, I actually did a blog called Inspiration Lamppost, and basically what that was I got together with some of my friends. We were younger then, rather than 16, we were like 14, and we just wrote a blog, and we were like, we're going to inspire teenagers, and we didn't really know how to do it. Our first blog looked horrible. We weren't the best writers, but we just kept at it, and every week we would publish new articles, and we did that for like a year and a half, and then we started Lionheart after that. And in both situations, we weren't necessarily at all qualified to be starting that. And the biggest thing was that we got better as we did it. And the truth is, even if you're bad at writing or bad at public speaking, you can still influence people with whatever story you have wherever you're at. You'll notice that story that I told about Grace when she came to the seminar and had her life changed or saved. She joined us at the beginning of our public speaking journey. We were much better speakers 2 years later, but she was still impacted on day 1. So really don't worry so much about, not connecting with people. Obviously, if you're really bad, then you may need to keep practicing until the right opportunity shows up. But just start, and you never know when you're going to influence people. So if you're wanting to influence people on YouTube or Instagram or something like that, just start making a video every other day or whatever cadence you want to choose. Start making it. You'll get better as you go. If you want to do a blog, start publishing. Write a little every day. Publish at least once a week. And that's basically the secret to it.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, well, we don't have any other questions coming through, but I think now is probably a good time to wrap up. So, Jacob, do you have any final words you could share with us about public speaking or entrepreneurship, or just life in general, just final words of wisdom?
Yeah, absolutely. So one last thing that I wanted to share with you guys, because I always think about what I'm going to talk about at events. That's, a good rule of thumb for speakers is to think about what they're going to talk about. And I wanted to remind you guys of a story you may have heard before. It's the story of Joseph in Egypt. It's from the Bible. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Bible, but for those who aren't, the story goes like this. Joseph is the last of 12 brothers. And I know that's a lot of brothers. He isn't liked by his brothers. In fact, he has to face a lot of opposition in his life, and he fights an uphill battle. In fact, it gets so bad that his brothers sell him into slavery. They kick him into a pit, and then he sits there for a couple days, and they sell him to some slave traders, and he loses everything. He loses his inheritance, he loses his family, and he gets sold as a slave, goes to Egypt, and then through a series of events while he's a slave, he ends up in jail. So he's a prisoner in a foreign country with nothing going for him. Now, if you know the story, you know that Joseph eventually ends up rising through the ranks, and he becomes the second most important person in all of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh. Now, it's a pretty remarkable story, but I think it has relevance for you and your life. I lived in Russia for 2 years, and it was hard there. I was there as a missionary for my church, and so I didn't have a lot of the economic and financial concerns that a lot of you guys have. But I talked with a lot of Russians, and I talked with a lot of immigrants to Russia, including a lot from Africa and other countries like in the Middle East. And they came to Russia because it was hard for them to live in their countries. It was hard for them to live in Nigeria. It was hard for them to live in Uzbekistan. So they migrated to Russia so they could do hard labor jobs, construction and road work and things like that, so they could scrape out a living because it was better than their home country. But then as an American, I'm looking at the Russians and I'm talking to the Russians, and the Russians are complaining. And they're like, my economy is so bad here. Putin is horrible, you know. Some people love Putin. I don't mean to get political. But they have a lot of corruption in Russia, and that's something that's commonly acknowledged throughout, most of the people, and it's hard to get ahead. Now, you may be thinking, if only I lived in America, because in America, everything is great. Now, we have our problems here too, but I will admit that it's easier to succeed financially here than in a lot of other countries. I can't speak for where you guys are from, but at least in Russia, I wouldn't want to live there. Unless I was a native Russian and I didn't speak English, then that would be great for me. But with where I am now, if I had to choose to build a business in America or build it in Russia, I would choose America, because circumstances are a little bit easier for businesses here in America. And I bet a lot of you are thinking to yourselves, man, why am I listening to this American kid, basically, who is just successful because he lives in America? And sure, he can have the time as a teenager to go build a public speaking movement because he doesn't have to pay the bills or anything like that. And I want you to know that I hear you, and I don't entirely understand your situation. But I want you to remember the story of Joseph in Egypt. He was able to succeed in circumstances that are a lot harder than yours. Because unless you're a prisoner in a cell in Egypt in feudal days, actually way before feudal days, this was like BC, 2000 or whatever, your life is better than his, and you have more opportunities than he does. And yet, he became second only to Pharaoh, one of the most important, powerful people in the world at that time. And so how did he do that? For one, he used his gifts. The Bible tells us that Joseph was blessed with the gift of interpreting dreams. And that was something unique to him. Now, you have things that are unique to you as well. I don't know exactly what they are. For me, some things that are unique to me, not unique as in no one has them, but some things that I'm really gifted at, I feel are public speaking and writing. I've always found it to be easy to speak in front of crowds, and I've always found it easy to write stuff. And so I'm using both of those gifts in my current business and in past businesses, and it's giving me a lot of success. So just like Joseph, you can tap into the gifts that only you have, and the things that you are best at. And in addition to that, the one thing that was perhaps more important than anything else was that Joseph followed God's commandments. He was righteous, and he was a good person. And that's really what set him apart, in addition to his gifts. Now, how does that apply to business? Well, there are a lot of people who would, metaphorically, sometimes literally, sell their own brother into slavery so that they can profit. You might think that you might get ahead in business by doing something that negatively impacts your friend or your family member, or taking opportunities at the expense of someone else. That's not how business works. Business works when you create value, and that's really the secret of being an entrepreneur. You don't have to take from someone else, you can create value, no matter where you are. So if you're honest, if you always give a full day's work for your pay, and if you even go above and beyond, and then if you follow God's commandments and you try to be the best person you can be, you're moral, you're ethical, and you just do your very best, then eventually I believe that you will prosper. And for me, more than anything else, doing my best to be a righteous person has given me more financial success than anything else. So just like Joseph in Egypt could succeed, you also can succeed no matter where you are or no matter who you are. So that's my last piece of advice for you.
Awesome, Jacob. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, especially for those final words of advice. It never considered that story of Joseph in Egypt to be, as much related to just like business and just someone who can succeed. But yeah, he was a pretty successful guy through everything he'd been through. No one's created equally, but we all have the opportunity to change our destiny. So thank you for that. Well, guys, we have been really blessed to hear from Jacob today, and I wish you the best as as each of you just continue to do your own like public speaking or you just inspirational careers, whatever it may be. I can also attach if it's all right with you, Jacob, some of your contact information in Slack if you guys want to reach out to him and maybe just learn more about Lionheart or just ask more questions. Would that be all right, Jacob?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, sweet. I'll go ahead and do that. So until Tuesday, I'll see you guys, and thank you again, Jacob, for coming on.